Well, we're going to get rolling here this week, and it's just been an up and down market, and we just want to take a step back and look at some global production in here. This week. I mean, we just don't want to sit here and debate the weather forecasts in here. I mean, there's good crops, there's poor crops. It's just getting, dissected so much. So I just think it's a good time to take a step back. The first thing we need to take a look at is just some charts here briefly. I mean, right now, this is a Dees corn chart, and as you can see by those two red lines, we've really spent the majority of our time on December corn between $5.25 and $6 a bushel since the 1st of May. Okay, we're going to break out as we look ahead. The one thing that doesn't show up on these charts in here and doesn't show up on the weather forecast and doesn't show up on the supply-demand tables, but what is a concern of ours right now is that the speculators are still net long more than 200,000 contracts of corn. The bullish news is getting stale on corn in here, and we think the biggest risk for corn as we move ahead is if the speculators decide to liquidate out of some of their net long positions. We need to remember, in order to get a bull market, we need outside money moving in, okay, and specs buying. They're already heavily net long corn. When we switch over to a bean chart here, similar to corn, you can see we're really kind of range bound since the 1st of May, call it 1275 to 1425. Where beans have an advantage over corn, though, is that we still have some weather issues potentially in front of us, okay, as this bean crop is made during the month of August. And the other thing is with beans, the speculators are only net long about 95,000 contracts of soybeans. And when you take a step back over the last year, they've had a net long position anywhere from about 40,000 was their smallest net long position to their biggest net long position of 240,000 contracts. Therefore, if we have a weather issue, there's probably some room for speculators to buy in soybeans. Conversely, if we've got favorable weather in the month of August, they don't have as big of a net long position to liquidate like we're seeing over in the corn market. Here's a Minneapolis wheat chart just for quick reference. We broke above 850 here a couple weeks ago, but it looks like last week's trade is probably a near-term high as harvest is fast approaching. Now we want to get into a couple things in here on world production, and this might go a little bit slower in here, and we have these tables up here for you to see, but we really want to make some points in here about global production. On the bean side of it, we've got 5 countries listed in here: U.S., China, Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. And what we have on the years on top is 19 and 2020, okay? And those are the calendar years and when those beans were harvested. Those are not the USDA marketing years. And as you look from calendar year 2019 to calendar year 2020, total global bean production, I shouldn't say global bean production, total production from these 5 countries increased about 780 million bushels. In the fall of 2020, though, we still had a major rally heading into 2021 as we had a big demand-led rally. As we look over to this next year and we compare 2020 on those same 5 countries to 2021, our production is only increasing about 468 million bushels between those 5 countries, not as much as the previous year. In the big picture, soybean demand increases globally around 400 to 500 million bushels a year. Therefore, if you want to be bullish a market in here based off of demand and a potential demand-led rally, beans is one where we've got the demand push in here, and production is only meeting about the current demand, okay? I think that's something that needs to be respected over here on the bean side of it. When we get over to the wheat market right now, we're looking at a bunch of different countries in here. I mean, we've got the EU, China, Russia, US, Canada, Ukraine, Argentina, Australia. Those 8 producers are the major wheat producers around the world. As we look back from calendar 2019 to 2020, you can see this global production dropped off 271 million bushels. That helped fuel the rally in late 2020 and into 2021. Okay, this drop down in world wheat production, when global demand increases about 400 million bushels per year, okay, was part of the bullish catalyst to lift the entire feed grain market. Now, as we look ahead to this year, what we need to recognize is that total wheat production that the USDA is forecasting for these 8 countries is up over 1 billion bushels from the previous year. EU's up 450 million bushels, Ukraine's up 168 million, and Australia just had a bumper crop, and their total wheat production is up more than 680 million bushels. Now, when you look at this figure in here and you notice Canada's production down 135 million bushels in here, that's getting all the attention. The major drought in the Canadian prairies, and even U.S. production is down about 80 million bushels from the previous year. But we have to remember, this is a global market, and this is why world wheat prices have softened up, because global production has bounced back in a big way. Okay, we need to respect that as we look at forward. The next thing we're going to show you is world coarse grain production, and we're just not going with corn. This goes with corn, sorghum, barley, and oats. And again, we have these figures all as billions of bushels. And on here is, again, 8 countries, US, China, EU, Canada, Russia, Ukraine, Brazil, and Argentina. And as you look back to last year, from calendar year 2019 to calendar year 2020, that total production, coarse grain production, was up a little more than 400 million bushels. Ukraine had a major drop in production, down almost 275 million, where the U.S. coarse grain production was up nearly 600 million bushels. The issue here, though, and what led to the rally in late 2020 into 2021, is global coarse grain consumption increases about 800 to 900 million bushels a year. We are getting a major drawdown in here on the ending stock levels because of a few minor crop issues throughout the world. Now, as we look to this year, though, what we need to recognize is total coarse grain production is going to increase almost 1.2 billion bushels. The U.S. is the big leader with a forecasted increase of almost 950 million bushels and a small increase in China. Well, we need to acknowledge that Brazil is getting all the attention from a poor crop there, as it is forecasted right now that their crop is going to drop off about 350 million bushels from last year, from 2020 to 2021, and that number probably could even grow a little bit more. You could see their total coarse grain production down 400 or maybe even 450 million bushels. But if you look just above Brazil on the Ukraine line, you can see that their production is already forecasted to increase about 333 million bushels. And this is where we have an issue when it comes to corn or the coarse grain. A lot of hype in the market right now is this lower Brazil production is going to lead to increased exports for U.S. corn. But we need to realize that there's other global competitors that may have some corn out to move on the world market. This is a big picture look at total supply out there, but it's something we need to respect. And the one frustrating thing with the news media is that they're only going to focus on the crop issues out there. They're not going to focus on where there's maybe some good production. We're going to wrap this up in here today. The one thing is you have to respect the global production out there, okay? We just view it's year after year right now that this is a global marketplace. And even though we want to focus on what the crop's like in North Dakota or Indiana or Iowa, we need to understand where it is on a global perspective. The other thing we got to keep in mind is the media only wants to focus on the major issues out there. For how much North Dakota makes the news in here, whether if it's with wheat or soybeans or corn, and they are the U.S. largest spring wheat producer, no doubt about it. But for how much it's in here, even on the soybean or the corn side of it, they are a relatively small producer, but yet getting so much of the market's, of the media's attention in here. The good crops really don't get a lot of attention in here, and really everyone who has good crops out there tends to be fairly quiet about that. I'd have to say, as calls come into the office, it's kind of evenly split from someone being really bullish to really bearish. When you start looking at these numbers out here right now, we think that from a bearish perspective, you should be attacking the corn or the winter wheat markets. If you have more of a bullish perspective, the bean market probably has more support underneath of it, and even maybe spring wheat. This is why when we're looking at making marketing decisions in here this year, we're not afraid of cash contracting aggressively on the corn or the winter wheat, or put fence positions in place and have our upside limited. Okay, but on the bean side of it, we like forward contracting and budgeting dollars with puts, because that market can be extremely volatile. The feed grains have responded with higher global production. And as we look ahead to 2022, our thinking right now is that beans or oil seeds need to get a larger acreage share, not only here in the US, but the rest of the world to satisfy that current demand. Now, does that occur by higher bean prices or does it occur by lower feed grain prices? That's something to be debated. But again, we just want to take a step back, kind of get away from weather in here this week, what the yield is going to be like here in the US, and take a big picture look at what we're seeing on a global perspective. Any questions or suggestions, feel free to give us a call or drop us an email. Have a great day.